Hey YouTube, it's Evan here at Movie Sauce. Haven't done a review in a while. I kind of had reviewed most of my stuff, but I have an opportunity to review Osmo X5R today, which I'd rented for something, and it's kind of a good companion piece to my original impressions on the Osmo and the X5 camera that I did last year. So today, I've got the X5R. I didn't buy this, just to be clear. I rented this for a project. So for comparison, this is the X5 camera that I still have and I use with my Inspire 1 drone. Which, just to clarify so people don't think I'm like a total DJI hater, I love my Inspire 1 drone. I use it a lot and I use it with the X5 camera. It's great for that. That's the main thing I use it for, and no problems with that. This is the X5 camera, this is the X5R. Now, these are the same camera, or how to explain it. Functionally, sensor-wise, internally, these are the exact same camera. What's clearly different here is this giant platform that the X5R is attached to. What this is it's basically like a little computer for processing the 4K footage out of this camera, which is the same sensor as this camera, but processing it in a raw format, which it saves on these big old proprietary SSD cards. It's very similar to like the red SSD cards. And then it also takes a little SD card on this side. And interestingly, you have to have both in there to record on either of them. And what it does is it kind of records a proxy file on the SD card for like quick viewing. So it's like a compressed version. And then the raw files I'll show in a little bit take a bit more trouble to get off the card. The reason I rented this, I have a client project that's coming up that potentially is going to require some vehicle mounted shots on an ATV. And an ATV is not as easy to mount a camera on as a car because there's not as many kind of hard sides on it, flat surfaces. So I do have like a bigger suction cup mount that I can use with my red camera, but I didn't think it was going to work very well on the ATV. And so I was kind of looking at different options, and I kind of came back around to the Osmo, which they now sell these various different mounts for, so you can kind of mount it anywhere. This is the suction cup mount, which actually works really, really well. It's just got your normal little kind of arm on there, and these little 3 suction cup points that you actually have levers that lock them down. And that's really, I mean, I could like almost pick up this whole table. It's super secure. It's got these little locks, and then you also have to kind of pull the suction off. But surprisingly strong suction cup mount that DJI sells. Props for that for sure. And then this is the old Osmo handle with the phone holder, and then this funky thing is the Z-axis that they sell. Kind of wanted to see what's the ultimate kind of Osmo experience. Like what's the best I can get out of this thing. So as you can see, kind of in the spectrum of gimbals, let me go ahead and boot it up. This is a pretty serious looking handheld gimbal between this giant SSD recorder section and the Z-axis. As you can see, the spring in the Z-axis is doing its job here. And you can adjust it. There's a little plus and minus thing. It's the exact same idea as the arm on a Steadicam. It's just a spring-loaded joint that you can adjust the tension on. So that's all that is, but it helps with your vertical bounce. Hopefully you can see this pretty well, how much up and down my hand is doing versus the camera. Obviously this is big, this is awkward to hold, and this is not for everyday situations per se. If you had a lot of money to blow, you certainly could. But everything's the same software-wise and everything with the regular Osmo or the X5. Everything functions the same, the handle's the same, your joystick still works. What you don't have to use is the X5 adapter, because they sell 2 different Z-axes. One's for the Pro/RAW, and then one's the regular. And the Pro/RAW has this wider section for holding the bases of these 2 cameras, which have that kind of second little step on them. So I actually took the adapter off to put the Z-axis on there, just in case you're super technical and have one of these and are thinking about it. But yeah, so this is a pretty pretty nifty little thing, especially considering it can record RAW. So I'm gonna show you some tests I did. First, let me get this rigged up. So on the Osmo, it has all these little kind of joints with teeth. There's one that the phone thing's mounted in. And actually, when I had this mounted on a vehicle, I didn't have the phone on there, so I just folded this up. I didn't take it off completely. And then this has a little section with the teeth on it too. So yeah, that's on there. So if you can imagine my desk right now being a vehicle, it's not a bad setup. If you can try to simulate some vibration, you get an idea. I'm not gonna show this, I'm not gonna film this on a vehicle. It's just too many things going on, but I will show you the results. So I've mounted this on the side of an ATV. Mounted it low on the front of my car and driven alongside the ATV. This footage is just from tests I've done. It's not from a client piece, just FYI. I've mounted on the hood, shooting back at me. Basically done a variety of different tests, just to kind of get a feel for it and see, is this a viable kind of quick and dirty way to get 4K raw footage on a car mount that doesn't require me doing the super heavy duty rigging of a red setup. And of course I did use safety straps in addition to this. I never do just the suction cup mounts, even though this is super good. Always tie some straps on there, especially if you're doing moving vehicles and stuff. And then one other thing besides the ATV that I did is also for a documentary project I'm working on with a friend of mine. Shot some stuff from a kayak on the lake that I live near. I did a couple different things. I mounted this on the kayak, kind of on the nose. And if you've ever been kayaking, you kind of rocking back and forth the whole time as you paddle. So I wanted to kind of see how this did with that. And at the same time, I also, just for the super quick and dirty solution, mounted a GoPro on the kind of front nose, basically right in the front of the kayak, kind of like this, upside down, and then flip the image in post. So the GoPro is going right over the water. Just to kind of get a comparison, this is a GoPro Hero 4, so it's not the latest and greatest. But I don't believe the image quality is much different between the Hero 4 and the Hero 5. But just to kind of get an idea, this is like kind of an older, kind of bare bones 4K setup. This is kind of the high end as far as handheld portable 4K setups go. It's raw. Just wanted to get an idea of the differences of the footage. And kind of also just at the end of the day, what's the easiest way to get the shot in kind of a high stress situation with vehicles and moving parts, and what's kind of the safest, easiest route to go. I did find when going kind of on a lot of the bigger bumps, depending on how you have it mounted, obviously it's a very strange kind of shape. And when you apply a lot of movement to it, like I think on one of the car mounts, it's more like this. The kind of teeth mount here, even though I got this as tight as I can physically tie it, I think some of the off-road stuff, I got so bumpy that it kind of the whole thing would shift on this joint a little bit. So obviously there is a limit to how much stress this can take. It's not really made for that. Not that it broke or anything, it's just the shot isn't as smooth in some places. So to wrap it up, I think it's a pretty solid setup. It's kind of weird because you're taking something meant for handheld and mounting it on a vehicle, and suddenly it becomes something different. But in my original Osmo review, I kind of talk how limited just a normal gimbal shot can be. And kind of thinking a little more outside the box as far as, well, maybe you can mount it on a kayak or a car or a four-wheeler, suddenly there's a little bit more versatility here that becomes interesting. It's not just a gimbal tracking shot or something. It's something much more. I got it close to the road, got it, you know, there's all kinds of different places you can put it, and that, I guess for me, that kind of clicked of, hey, this is a little more interesting than just a handheld gimbal. So I'm starting to, I guess my opinion's evolving a little bit, and that suddenly this is a little bit more versatile of a thing if you start kind of buying into the accessories and stuff and thinking outside the box a little bit about how you can use it. Certainly as a time saver compared to rigging like a Ronin on a car mount with a Red, that's a huge setup, and it's also a risky setup, an expensive setup. Granted, this is still an expensive camera, the raw version, but you know, it's definitely a more apt comparison to compare the X5R in the Red than just the X5 in the Red, because here we're talking about raw 4K versus raw 6K, but for 4K output. It's a little bit more of an apples to apples comparison, and then you really start seeing the advantages of the portability and the simplicity of the Osmo. There are still a few downsides overall. The batteries are still a problem. They still only last about 30 minutes a piece. So you're going to the trouble rigging this up on a car, and going to do a shot or going out for a kayak run. It's really just kind of, you really only have time for one shot per battery if you're really talking about mounting it somewhere. Now, it's not a problem if you carry a lot of batteries around, and especially if you're doing something a little more professional, you're going to need to be prepared for that. It's still pretty annoying that they had to be changed out so frequently. Now, they do charge pretty fast. They charge in about an hour, and they run out in about 30 minutes, so there's probably a certain number of them. If you did the math, you could get, like, I don't know, you probably run pretty consistently off of like 4 batteries or so. But it's just, you know, it's just sort of annoying that it can't run off a little bit more efficiently. Now, image quality, obviously the RAW is a step up from the X5. For me personally, that's a big deal. The difference is substantial enough to where I would use this more than I would use this. The fact that this is RAW suddenly makes it a little more approachable for commercial uses for me. Whereas this I use for, you know, aerial shots, and it's great for that. But I still wouldn't use this for ground-based stuff. It's just the high compressed 4K doesn't do it for me for a lot of stuff. But having the raw footage certainly is nice. But one of the major problems with this raw footage is it's not nearly as elegant as the Red Code RAW on a Red camera. The Red RAW workflow is pretty standardized now. I feel like a lot of people, if you've worked with raw video, it's a good chance it's with a Red. One of the secrets to what's so great about the Red camera is their Red Code compression, which is relatively easy and simple to work with. DJI's raw workflow is not. I'll just say off the bat. I didn't think I would need that SD card at first. After doing a couple shoots and offloading, I'm really glad that they force you to do that, because the proxy files on the SD card are what I'm using to quickly review my shots. But the raw footage that comes off the SD card has to go through a couple crazy processes. So this is the SSD card. This is the reader. It's just USB 3. So you slap that in there, plug it into your computer, and I'm on a Windows system. Right off the bat, you'll get the sound of something hooked up, but like if you open the folder, there's nothing there. What you have to do is go to the DJI website and download the DJI footage exporter, I think is what it's called. There's basically a program specifically for interpreting this footage. So you bring up this DJI exporter app. This is the PC app. I believe it's a different app on a Mac. It automatically detects the drive and what's on it. So even though the Windows folder shows it as empty, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shots that I got earlier today on there. So what you do is you can either selectively pick your shots, or you can just select them all and then hit export. It'll ask you where to put them. I will put them, sorry, just looking at my drive here. Osmo raw test, I'll put them in here. And then it starts this process of actually like processing the footage into Cinema DNG, and it's not a fast process. I wish it would tell me how much of the drive's used up. I want to say this is like, gosh, I don't know. maybe a third to half the drive filled up. It's a 512 gigabyte drive, so it's a lot of data. It's not that much footage. I want to say, it's purely speculation on my point, but I want to say that the raw encoding is less efficient than the red code. I think the red files are smaller. What I normally shoot at 6K on average, I think it's more efficient than this 4K raw stuff on the Osmo. That just comes down to DJI not having as powerful as a codec as red code. Again, this is speculation on my point. I don't know this for sure. I haven't done any scientific testing to prove that. It's just a hunch I have going off of how much I shot with this on this card today versus how much I normally shoot on a red card, which is 480 gigabytes, so it's pretty close. Just kind of knowing how much footage I have roughly based on my instincts. I feel like this is a lot less footage, taking up a lot more space. And as you can see, it only, God, how long was that to go to 1%? So this is a process. So you definitely want to run with the SD card first to kind of look at your footage, because this is the kind of thing you will do at the end of your day, let it run and sleep on it and then come back to it later. It's a little weird to me that they call that exporting. To me, that's importing. But I guess it's exporting it from the card to the computer, whatever. So once you get on your computer, it's Cinema DNG file. I use Adobe Premiere Pro. It reads that file just fine. The only problem is it's not nearly as efficient as red file. So I'm not shy about using raw footage, as I've explained in my Redditing video where I talk about how red footage is easier to work with than you think. I kind of feel like I have a pretty decent computer setup that can handle it, and I've been editing with raw red footage for a long time with no problems. This footage I can barely watch playback on within Premiere on my system. So there, you get a couple seconds, then it kind of freezes. And I'm not sure, if it's a file size issue or if it's a processing issue, but either way, it's way less friendly than red footage. Normally I wouldn't be having any trouble with raw red footage right now, but this is stuttering like crazy, freezing most of the time. You can only really get a few seconds in before you gotta stop it and start it again. And you just only get a couple more seconds, and then boom, it's stutter, 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 and then freezing up. So this has been my experience. Maybe some other people had different experiences, but just what I'm seeing is that the Cinema DNG file that they give you is pretty tricky to work with. Now, I have only been editing over USB 3 with a 72 RPM drive. So granted, that could be part of the bottleneck. If I was on editing from an SSD, maybe it'd be a little faster. But regardless, the workflow I use for red at 6K raw is fine for playback, and this is really hard to watch your footage with. So it is really nice. When I first opened up the raw footage and you can kind of see that flatter image with all the information, I was really excited because this was the closest I've gotten to kind of working with raw red footage, but in a much tinier, easier to use package as far as mounting and stuff. And so the color information is there, and I will say right off the bat, the raw footage looks awesome. And I've used the built-in Lumetri color in Premiere to color correct and was able to get some really awesome results out of it. Especially doing a side-by-side with the SD card footage, which I just recorded on the normal color settings. I didn't do the D-Log or any of that. So I'll just do an apples to apples comparison of how that footage kind of works with my color correcting of the raw footage versus the standard processing as it's recording. But what I've found is I don't want to export a proxy before I color. So my kind of quick workflow right now that I honestly haven't thought that much about, but what I do is I bring it in the footage. I just bring in the whole clip. I don't pull any clips out, and I try to kind of find my ideal kind of color first, just focusing in on one frame because it hardly plays. I try to color correct it first, then export that clip as I've been doing DNX files. I want a Windows system. Premiere can't natively do ProRes, or I would do ProRes. But the point is to do some kind of better intermediate codec. So I actually export the footage again to make it something I can actually edit. So that's kind of annoying, is first you've got to kind of jump through hoops just to copy the footage onto your drive using the DJI software. And then you've got to kind of almost process it one more time once you bring it into Premiere into a more edit-friendly format. This is definitely a raw workflow that I think would turn a lot of people off, especially because the footage is pretty decent off of the SD card, whatever that proxy is. And I don't know the exact data rates off the top of my head. Granted, it may be kind of close to the X5, but if you're on a crunch and you've got that footage, you just kind of want to do something fast. So for me, I've jumped through the hoops to do this because I do think the quality is better and worth it. It's just annoying because it's slower for me than even working with the Red. But that being said, I guess the trade-off is you have a much smaller package. You can put this places. It's not as easy to put a Red. So overall, I was pleased. Whereas I wouldn't consider the X5 as much for commercial work outside of just drone work. The X5R was a bit of fresh air in terms of like, oh wow, the raw quality does make a big difference. I just wish the raw quality was a little bit easier to work with, the workflow. Maybe that'll get better with time. This camera is over a year old now. I'm sure DJI has another solution coming around the corner like they always do. Again, this is just my perspective from what I've worked with. I only rented this for a couple days. I by no means have mastered this workflow. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, whatever, I'll try to answer things the best I can. Yeah, so thanks. Subscribe if you want. I'm probably not going to do a ton more gear videos, to be honest with you. This just was some kind of a conversation I started in a previous video. Since I had this and I was using it for some stuff, I figured I'd share that experience with you guys as well. Maybe that'll help some people. I'm sure a lot less people have used the X5R than the X5. Also, just to know, I rented this for 4 days. I think it comes out as a 5-day rental because I did it over a weekend. And it was about $500. But just to give you kind of a frame of reference, buying all this would be over $3,000, but you can rent, for a couple of days to do something for several $100. So there are cost-effective ways to use this. Anyway, that's it. I'll stop talking. Hope this helps some people. Thanks for watching.